The boardroom was filled with the hum of whispered conversations as the CEO stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the city skyline. But inside, a storm was brewing, a storm he couldn't control. His fingers gripped the edge of the table as the words echoed in his mind. She's been promoted? A woman? His mind raced, unable to comprehend the decision that had just been made. The promotion of a female officer within his company was supposed to be a moment of pride for diversity. Instead, it felt like a slap to his ego, his beliefs, his control over the business. He could feel the heat of anger rising in his chest, burning through his carefully composed exterior. The meeting had started like any other, but then it happened. The HR manager had announced the new appointment, a woman, young and ambitious, promoted to a high-ranking position within the company. Everyone seemed thrilled by the change. Everyone, except for him. She doesn't deserve it, he muttered under his breath, his voice thick with frustration. His hands clenched into fists, knuckles turning white. He couldn't understand why they had chosen her. She wasn't from the right circles. She wasn't a part of the business elite. She hadn't earned the same respect that others had. And yet, here she was, being handed an opportunity that had eluded him for years. He couldn't just let it go. No, this wasn't about gender, this was about power. His power. She had somehow managed to take what was rightfully his, a promotion he had worked tirelessly for, a chance to prove himself in the upper echelons of the business world. Yet now, she was the one celebrated, the one everyone talked about. With his anger growing, he stormed out of the room, his footsteps heavy against the marble floor. His thoughts clouded with doubt and resentment. Why her? Why not him? As he made his way down the hallway, a sense of urgency gripped him. He needed answers, needed to find out what was going on. The elevator doors closed behind him, and the businessman stared at his reflection in the polished metal. The rising anger in his chest was mirrored in the steely expression on his face. What did they see in her? Was there something more to this promotion than anyone had let on? A voice inside him screamed to act, to find out everything about her, to get to the bottom of it. By the time the elevator reached the ground floor, his mind had already shifted. No longer was this just about a promotion, it was a challenge. His challenge. He wasn't going to let a newcomer, someone he barely knew, take what he had worked so hard for. He would find out everything about her. He would dig into her past. He would find the cracks, the weaknesses. If there was something fishy about her rise to power, he would uncover it. As he walked out into the parking garage, his anger transformed into determination. He would not let this go unnoticed. No, this was just the beginning. He would make sure the truth was revealed. But what he didn't know yet was that his investigation into her would not only challenge his assumptions, but it would also change the course of his life forever. There was more to this woman than he could have ever imagined, and soon, he would be forced to confront a truth far beyond his comprehension. The first twist in this story had already been set in motion. And nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, the businessman's mind was still ablaze with thoughts of her promotion. He couldn't shake the image of her standing confidently in front of the board, smiling as if she belonged there. The audacity of it all. It was as if she had been handed a victory without having to fight for it, without the years of blood, sweat, and tears he had put into his own rise through the ranks. Determined to uncover the truth, he began his search. His office became a fortress of paper, notes, and digital files as he dug deeper into the woman's background. Every piece of information, every scrap of data, was scrutinized. He discovered that her name wasn't one that had appeared in any of the senior meetings before, nor had she been part of the usual networking circles that he and other top executives had frequented. She had no major family connections, no long-standing relationships with investors or politicians, nothing that could explain her sudden rise. But there was one thing that stood out among the countless facts he found: the officer had worked on a special project. A project that no one knew much about. It was shrouded in secrecy, a project that had been initiated years ago under a veil of confidentiality. But now, with her promotion, the whispers of this project grew louder, and it became clear that her involvement was far deeper than anyone had realized. His curiosity grew as he pored over the details of the project. It was linked to a new, cutting-edge technology, a breakthrough in artificial intelligence that could change the landscape of business itself. His mind raced as he considered the possibilities. Could this woman be the key to something much larger than a simple promotion? Had her promotion been the result of her work on this revolutionary technology? What he learned next only added to the mystery. The project had been under development for years, hidden from the public eye, and there were rumors that it could disrupt the entire industry. The woman had played a crucial role in its development, contributing to the technology in ways that no one had expected. And yet, she had remained largely unknown to the wider business world, working quietly in the background. Her skill set, the very qualities that had earned her the promotion, seemed to be the product of this secretive, highly classified project. Still, something didn't sit right with him. Why had this officer, someone who had worked so far under the radar, been chosen for such a high position? There had to be more to the story than just her involvement in the project. He couldn't accept that a single successful initiative could elevate someone to such a high rank without more evidence. And so, he decided to dig deeper. He sought out those who had worked with her, people who might have insights into her character, her motivations, and most importantly, her real intentions. But as he spoke to colleagues and tried to piece together a fuller picture, he found that many were hesitant to say anything at all. It was as if they were all guarding a secret, protecting her in some way. Every conversation left him with more questions than answers. But there was one thing he couldn't ignore: the way people spoke about her when they weren't being watched. Behind the professionalism, there was a level of respect and admiration that was rare in the cutthroat world of business. It was as though, beneath the surface, she held a power that no one was willing to acknowledge openly. The businessman's obsession grew. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, the calm, collected expression, the quiet strength in her demeanor. He couldn't get her out of his mind. Who was she really? What was the secret she was hiding? And more importantly, why had she been promoted over him? The deeper he dug, the more he realized that this wasn't just about a woman in a high position. It was about power, real, dangerous power that was far beyond anything he had ever encountered. The business world was about to change, and he couldn't decide if he was ready for what lay ahead. He was starting to feel like he was swimming in an ocean of unknowns, and with every stroke, he was sinking deeper. But as his investigation continued, a thought gnawed at him: what if he was wrong about her? What if she was the one holding the key to unlocking something much bigger than both of them? The more he learned, the more he realized that this woman was not just an employee in the company, she was a catalyst. And the change she was about to bring would rock everything he thought he knew about business, technology, and power. His obsession with uncovering the truth was about to lead him down a path he could never have imagined. And he would soon find that there were forces far stronger than his anger at play. Forces that could make or break him. The businessman's mind was consumed with thoughts of the officer. Every new piece of information about her only fueled his growing suspicion. Her promotion, her involvement in the secret project, and the quiet reverence with which she was regarded by her colleagues, it was all too much. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he was missing, something that everyone else had overlooked. As the days passed, he found himself watching her from a distance, observing her in meetings and on the company floor. There was no doubt that she was smart, sharp, and confident. But there was also an air of mystery about her, a calm that seemed almost too composed, as if she was always several steps ahead of everyone else. It was unsettling. The businessman had always prided himself on being a master of reading people. He could tell when someone was hiding something, when they were playing a game, or when they were simply too good to be true. And with her, there was always that sense that something wasn't right. His suspicion only deepened when he learned that she had been meeting with people from outside the company. These weren't casual lunch meetings or networking events. No, these were private, closed-door meetings with high-level government officials, scientists, and tech giants. She had connections that reached far beyond the walls of the business world, and the businessmen knew that whatever was going on behind the scenes, it had to be important. But what was it? Why was she meeting with people in positions of power? What was this mysterious project she had been working on, and why had she kept it so secret for so long? The more he dug, the more he realized that he was running out of answers, and the closer he got to the truth, the more dangerous the game became. It was a rainy evening when the businessman decided to take a bold step. He would confront her directly. No more guessing, no more suspicion. It was time to put everything on the line and face her, to demand answers to the questions that had been eating away at him. He knew it would be risky, but his mind was made up. He couldn't continue living with the weight of uncertainty hanging over him. He arranged a meeting with her under the guise of discussing company strategy. He was nervous, but his anger and frustration overpowered any fear. This was his chance. When he walked into the conference room, she was already there, sitting at the head of the table, calmly sipping her coffee. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, he saw something in her gaze, a hint of acknowledgement, as if she already knew what he was about to ask. "Let's get to the point," he said, his voice firm but controlled. "What's really going on here? You've been promoted, and no one seems to know why. What is this project you've been working on, and why has it been kept so secret?" She didn't flinch. Instead, she set her coffee down and leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "I see you've been digging, trying to uncover things you think you should know. But what you're looking for isn't what you think." Her words struck him like a cold wave, and for the first time since he started his investigation, he felt a chill run down his spine. She wasn't playing by the same rules. She knew he was onto her, and yet, she wasn't afraid. She was calm, almost too calm. "Do you really want to know?" she asked, her voice steady and measured. "Because once you do, there's no going back." He hesitated for a moment, uncertainty creeping into his thoughts. What did she mean by that? What could be so dangerous about the truth that she would warn him off? But the businessman's pride won over. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. "Yes," he replied, his voice laced with determination. "Tell me what you've been hiding. Tell me why you've been promoted over others, and what this project really means." For a moment, there was silence between them. The air in the room felt heavier, charged with tension. Then, she leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "The truth," she said, her voice low, "is that the world is changing. The power structures we've built are about to be torn apart. And I'm the one who holds the key to that change." The businessman's heart raced. This wasn't what he expected. What was she talking about? "What do you mean?" he demanded, his voice rising slightly in disbelief. "You're talking about some kind of revolution, aren't you? What could a project like that possibly have to do with this company?" She didn't answer right away, but instead looked at him with an expression that mixed pity with something else, something far more dangerous. "You don't understand yet, do you? You're too focused on power as it exists right now. But the power I have, the power we're building, it's something that will change everything. The company, the government, the world, it will all be reshaped." The businessman's mind raced. What was she saying? Could it really be true? Was she working on something that could topple entire systems of power? He had never been one to believe in conspiracy theories or grandiose claims, but the way she spoke, so calmly, so assured, made him question everything he thought he knew. And then, as if sensing his growing anxiety, she added one final sentence that would haunt him for days to come: "You've seen just the surface. But the deeper you dig, the more you'll realize that nothing will ever be the same again. His breath caught in his throat. He had uncovered a secret that was far bigger and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The officer was no longer just a pawn in a corporate game. She was part of something much larger, a force that could reshape the future. The businessman was in too deep now, and there was no turning back. The room felt colder now, despite the warmth of the coffee that sat forgotten between them. The businessman could barely contain the storm of questions racing through his mind. She had just told him that the world as he knew it was about to change, but the calmness in her voice made the situation feel all the more unnerving. There was a sense of inevitability in her words that he couldn't ignore. She wasn't just talking about a simple promotion anymore. She was speaking about something much bigger, something that could threaten the very foundation of everything he had worked for. For a moment, he simply stared at her, his mind struggling to catch up with her revelation. The idea that this woman, who had once seemed so ordinary, could be at the center of such a monumental shift was almost too much to process. "You're not making any sense," he said finally, his voice hoarse, the anger and frustration still bubbling under the surface. "What exactly is this power you're talking about? What is this project, and why are you keeping it hidden?" The officer's eyes remained fixed on him, her expression unreadable. "Because if I told you everything right now, you wouldn't believe me," she replied, her voice steady. "No one would. Not until they see it for themselves." The businessman took a step closer, the distance between them suddenly feeling much too small. His patience was running thin. He needed answers, and he needed them now. "I don't have time for riddles. If you think I'm going to sit here and let you play your little game, you're wrong." Her lips curled into a small smile, but there was no humor in it, only the faintest trace of something darker. "I'm not playing a game," she said, her voice suddenly hard. "What you're up against isn't something you can control with your usual tactics. It's bigger than that." "Then tell me what it is," he demanded, his tone sharp. "You've already set the stage. Now finish it. Tell me what you're involved in." The officer paused, as though considering whether to reveal more. Finally, she spoke. "The project I'm working on is not just a corporate initiative. It's a global effort to disrupt the power structure that has existed for centuries. It's about control, who has it, who gets to keep it, and who is left to suffer in its wake. And I'm at the center of it." He blinked, trying to make sense of her words. "So this project, this is about destroying everything I've built?" The disbelief was clear in his voice. The very thought of someone dismantling the empire he had worked so hard to build felt impossible. The officer's gaze didn't waver. "No. It's about creating something new. A more equitable system, one where power isn't concentrated in the hands of a few wealthy, powerful individuals. The current system, the one you're so invested in, won't survive much longer." The businessman's mind reeled as he tried to piece together what she was saying. "And you think you can just change everything? Do you have any idea what kind of chaos that will cause? The stock market, the global economy, everything will fall apart." She nodded, her expression unwavering. "Exactly. And that's why no one can be allowed to stop it. Once the system is in motion, there will be no turning back. It's already too late to undo what's been set into motion." The businessman was silent for a moment, the weight of her words settling over him like a thick fog. He had spent his entire life fighting for his place in this world. Everything he had built, his company, his wealth, his influence, depended on the current power structure. And now, she was telling him it would all crumble, replaced by something completely new. But could he really believe her? Was she truly a part of something so enormous, or was this some kind of elaborate ploy? "I don't believe you," he said finally, though his voice was quieter, unsure now. "This is insane. No one, can just tear down the entire system like that." The officer leaned forward slightly, her voice lower but no less firm. "You're right. No one can just tear it down. But what we're doing isn't about destruction, it's about transformation. The system will fall, yes, but in its place will be something better, something more just." The businessman was still struggling to absorb everything she was saying. "And what makes you think you're the one to lead this transformation?" His words were laced with skepticism. She seemed like just another ambitious, overconfident young woman, taking on something far beyond her comprehension. But the more she spoke, the more he began to question his own certainty. "Because I'm not leading it alone," she said, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I'm part of something much bigger than me. And once it's set in motion, there's no stopping it. You either get on board now, or you'll be left behind. It's that simple." The businessman stared at her, struggling to process what she was saying. Could she really be telling the truth? Was this really happening? Could the world as he knew it really be on the brink of change? The very idea of it made his blood run cold. But there was something else, the certainty in her eyes, the unwavering conviction in her words, that made him question everything. The room seemed to close in around him as he grappled with this new reality. If she was right, everything he had worked for could be wiped out in an instant. The life he had built, the power he held, could all vanish. And the worst part? There was nothing he could do to stop it. Not now. But he wasn't ready to give up just yet. He wouldn't go down without a fight. And he knew one thing for certain, he couldn't let this woman, or whatever she represented, destroy everything he had fought for. He took a step back, trying to regain some sense of control. "You think you can just walk in and change everything," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "Well, I'm not just going to sit here and let that happen. You've made a huge mistake." The officer didn't respond right away, but when she did, her voice was low and chilling. "No. The mistake wasn't mine." She paused, looking him squarely in the eyes. "The mistake was yours. You underestimated what's coming. And you'll regret it." Her words hung in the air, a final warning. And as the businessman walked out of the room, his heart pounding, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made the most dangerous decision of his life. The game had changed, and there was no telling who would come out on top. The businessman couldn't escape the officer's words, even in the hours that followed their confrontation. The weight of her message hung heavily in his mind, leaving him restless and uncertain. His thoughts swirled like a storm, and he found himself pacing in his office late into the night, trying to piece together the puzzle. Was she truly a part of something larger? Was the world on the brink of transformation? Or was she just playing a dangerous game of manipulation? He had known this day would come, where power and influence would be tested. But the stakes had never been this high before. If what she said was true, everything he had worked for could be at risk. His empire, the foundation of his success, could crumble beneath the weight of a new, unyielding force that he couldn't understand. Just as his mind threatened to overwhelm him, the phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, but something told him he needed to answer. "Hello?" His voice was tight with tension. A calm, familiar voice on the other end responded, "I think you need to hear this." It was an old associate of his from a time long past, someone who had always been on the periphery of his business dealings. The kind of person who dealt in rumors, information, and backdoor connections, someone who might know things the businessman couldn't access through his usual channels. "What is it?" he asked, his voice laced with impatience, but also an undeniable curiosity. "You've been asking about her, haven't you?" the voice on the other end said. "About the officer, I mean. About the project she's working on." The businessman's pulse quickened. "What do you know? Tell me everything." The voice paused for a moment before continuing, each word dripping with mystery. "She's not just a player in this. She's been working with a group of individuals who've been laying the groundwork for something massive. Something that's been in the works for decades." The project she's a part of isn't just about changing the business world, it's about changing the world itself. The businessman leaned forward in his chair, his mind racing. What do you mean, changing the world? What are they planning? Another pause. Then the voice came back, quieter this time, as though the person was afraid of being overheard. It's a new form of technology. A technology that could give power to the masses, taking it away from the elite. Something that could disrupt the entire economic system as we know it. It's artificial intelligence, but not in the way you think. It's more advanced, more dangerous than anything anyone has seen before. His breath caught in his throat. AI? He repeated, his voice barely a whisper. That's what this is all about? Yes. But it's not just AI. It's a form of intelligence that doesn't follow the rules, that doesn't rely on the traditional structures you and others in the business world have built. It's self-sustaining, self-evolving, and once it's unleashed, there's no stopping it. The businessman could feel the room closing in around him. This was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. But there was still one question left, the one that had been gnawing at him since his confrontation with the officer. Why her? Why did she get involved in this? What's her role in all of this? The voice on the other end hesitated before answering, and when it came, the words sent a chill down his spine. She's the key. She's the one who's been chosen to oversee its launch. And she's been kept in the dark about the full scope of it all, until now. She doesn't even fully understand the magnitude of what she's a part of. But she's the one who will make the final decision. The businessman's mind reeled. He had no idea who was behind this project or what their ultimate goal was. But one thing was clear, if this technology fell into the wrong hands, or into the hands of someone with the power to control it, the world would never be the same. His own empire, his business, his influence, everything he had fought for, could be rendered obsolete in a single move. It was a nightmare scenario, one that could shatter everything he had built and replace it with a new world he couldn't even begin to comprehend. The voice on the other end spoke again, drawing him out of his thoughts. You're not the only one trying to figure this out. There are others looking for answers, too. But you should know this, there are forces at play here that you cannot fight. There are powers greater than your wealth, your influence, your business acumen. And once the project is in motion, there will be no turning back. The businessman felt a cold shiver run down his spine. What do I do? How do I stop it? His words were desperate now, the fear creeping in. You don't, the voice said flatly. You can't stop it. The only thing you can do now is decide whether to align yourself with it or stand against it. Either way, things are changing. And no one, not even someone as powerful as you, can stop it. The line went dead. The businessman sat there, staring at the phone in disbelief. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion and panic. There was nothing he could do. No way to stop the inevitable. What if he had been wrong about everything? What if the world wasn't just about business and control anymore? What if it was all leading to something bigger, something far beyond his reach? He had a choice to make, and as the clock ticked on, he realized there was no escaping the future that was now hurtling toward him. He was no longer in control. And that realization left him more vulnerable than he had ever felt before. The businessman barely slept that night, his mind caught in a vicious cycle of thoughts he couldn't escape. The conversation with his mysterious contact only added to his anxiety. He had been given information that he wasn't sure he wanted to know. The power of the officer's project, the potential destruction of everything he had built, it was too much to process. But there was no turning back now. The pieces were in place, and the game was far from over. The following morning, he found himself staring at his reflection in the mirror, as if trying to make sense of the man who was now standing there. A man who was no longer certain of his place in the world. A man whose very existence was being questioned by forces beyond his understanding. The office was quieter than usual when he arrived. The usual hum of activity that greeted him each morning felt distant, muffled. He couldn't focus. His thoughts kept drifting back to the officer, her calm demeanor, her cryptic words. She was involved in something that had the potential to reshape the future. And yet, what worried him most was how little he truly knew about her. By mid-morning, his assistant came in with an envelope, marked with a seal he hadn't seen in years, an emblem he thought was long forgotten. The logo was simple, but the weight of it sent a chill down his spine. It was a reminder of the old power structures, the ones that had once ruled over his business dealings. The ones that had shaped his rise to the top. He opened the envelope carefully, as if afraid of what it might contain. Inside was a single sheet of paper, with a few lines of text that seemed to cut through the tension in his chest like a knife. Meet me tonight. Midnight. Same place. You'll get the answers you're looking for. Don't tell anyone. The note was unsigned, but there was no mistaking the handwriting. It was hers, the officer's. He should have been cautious. He should have ignored it, stayed in control. But something inside him, something deep and primal, urged him to follow her instructions. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when he would uncover the truth, once and for all. As the day stretched on, time seemed to move in slow motion. The businessman tried to keep his focus, but his thoughts were consumed with what awaited him that night. What would she reveal? What would he discover? The fear was there, yes, but so was an undeniable sense of anticipation. When the evening finally arrived, he found himself standing in front of the same building he had visited earlier. The city had grown quieter as the night deepened, the streets emptying out, the air thick with tension. His pulse quickened as he made his way up the steps, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The door to the building was unlocked when he arrived. He stepped inside, the cool air inside contrasting sharply with the warm summer night. He walked through the dark hallways, unsure of what to expect. Every sound seemed amplified in the silence, the creaking of the floorboards beneath his feet, the sound of his breath. He finally reached the office he had visited before, the door cracked open slightly. Without hesitation, he pushed the door open. Inside, the officer was waiting. She was sitting at the same table where their previous meeting had taken place, but this time, there was something different about her. She wasn't just calm, she was confident in a way that was almost unsettling. The moment she saw him, she stood, a knowing look in her eyes. "I told you you'd come," she said softly, her voice carrying an edge of certainty. "I don't know what to believe anymore," the businessman admitted, his voice thick with emotion. This project, your promotion, everything, it doesn't add up. I need to know what's really going on." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing whether to reveal the final pieces of the puzzle. Finally, she spoke. "You've been asking all the wrong questions," she said, her voice low but steady. "It's not about what's happening now. It's about what's coming." Her words sent a shiver down his spine. He had been thinking of this as a game of power, a way to win, to take back control. But now it felt much larger, much more dangerous. "What's coming?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, her gaze never leaving his. "The world is changing, and it's not going to wait for you to catch up. The project I've been working on isn't just a tool to shift power, it's a mechanism for survival. When the shift happens, those who are ready will rise. Those who aren't will fall." The businessman shook his head in disbelief. "You mean to tell me that you've been working on some kind of survival mechanism? For what, exactly?" The officer's eyes darkened. "For the future. For the world that's coming. The current system is crumbling. You see it, don't you? The cracks are already showing. The economy, the environment, the balance of power, it's all teetering on the edge of collapse. What we're building is a bridge to something new. Something better. The businessman felt his stomach drop. He had heard rumors of change, of unrest, but this was something else entirely. The officer wasn't just talking about a shift in power or a change in the business world. She was talking about the very foundation of civilization itself. "What does this mean for me?" he asked, his voice thick with anxiety. "For people like me?" "It means you have a choice," she replied. "You can stand by, let it all collapse, and hope you survive. Or you can be a part of the change. It's up to you." The businessman felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. How could he possibly make that decision? The world he knew was built on a fragile system, one that was now crumbling before his eyes. And yet, the thought of embracing something unknown, something so radically different, terrified him. "I need time," he said, stepping back. "I need time to think." The officer nodded, her expression unreadable. "Time is something we're running out of. But take it. The clock is ticking." As the businessman left the building that night, his mind was a whirlwind. He had come for answers, but what he had received was even more uncertainty. The project, the power, the world that was coming, it was all too much to process. But one thing was clear, the future was no longer in his control. And the choice he would soon have to make would determine whether he was part of the future, or part of the past. The businessman hardly slept that night. His mind was a battlefield, with every decision, every consequence, racing through his head. He had come to the meeting seeking answers, but what he had learned had left him with more questions than ever. The officer had given him a glimpse of a future he wasn't ready for, one that left him feeling helpless and overwhelmed. By morning, the weight of the decision he had to make was suffocating. The officer's words echoed in his mind, the challenge she had posed: be part of the change or watch everything he had built crumble. The systems he had spent years perfecting, the power he had so carefully accumulated, it was all on the line. He had never felt so out of control in his life. The truth was, he didn't want to let go of the world he knew. His business empire, his influence, had taken years of work and sacrifice to build. It was his legacy. And now, here was this officer, with her cryptic project and her grand vision of a new world, a world he was being asked to help create, whether he was ready or not. The businessman sat at his desk, staring at the reports in front of him. Numbers. Data. Market trends. None of it made sense anymore. The world was changing, and no matter how much he tried to control it, the truth was staring him in the face. He wasn't as powerful as he had thought. There were forces beyond his grasp, ones that didn't follow the rules of business or politics or power. He needed answers. He needed to understand what was at stake. And he needed to know if he had any choice but to accept the future that was unfolding before him. Without warning, he stood up and walked out of his office. There was no longer any use in pretending that everything was under control. The time had come to face the truth. He called a meeting with the officer. This time, it would be different. He would get to the heart of the matter. He needed to understand why she had chosen this path, why she believed this project could change the world. But more than that, he needed to know what role he would play in all of it. When he arrived at the office, he found her waiting for him. She was alone, sitting at the same table as before. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, as though the air itself had thickened with the weight of everything they had discussed. "You've made your decision then?" she asked, her voice calm, but there was a glimmer of something else in her eyes, a quiet understanding. The businessman took a deep breath. "I'm not sure yet. But I need to know more. I need to understand the full scope of what we're talking about here. What does this project really mean? What are the consequences?" She nodded slowly, as if expecting his question. "You already know that the world is changing," she said. "The systems we have in place, business, government, even the way we communicate, they're all built on a foundation that is no longer sustainable. That's what this project is about. We've developed a new form of artificial intelligence, one that's not just about machines and data. It's about reshaping the way people think, interact, and make decisions. The businessman frowned. So, this is more than just a new technology. This is a revolution. Yes, she replied. But it's not a violent one. It's not about overthrowing governments or destroying the economy. It's about changing the very way we understand power and control. We're building a new system, one that's based on collaboration rather than competition. It's not about who has more money or more influence, it's about the collective good. The businessman felt a knot tighten in his chest. But how can that be possible? The world isn't built on collaboration. It's built on competition. How do you expect to change everything overnight? The officer's gaze never wavered. It's not about changing everything overnight. It's about planting the seeds for a new future. This project is just the beginning. But it's a beginning that could save humanity from itself. The systems we've relied on for centuries are collapsing under their own weight. If we don't adapt, we'll destroy ourselves. She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. You've seen the signs, haven't you? The cracks in the system? The growing unrest? This is just the beginning of a much bigger change. And you're right about one thing, we can't control it. But we can guide it. We can be a part of the change, or we can be left behind. The businessman's mind raced. She was speaking the truth, he had seen the signs. The unrest in the streets. The volatility in the markets. The rapid advancement of technology that seemed to be outpacing everything else. But to embrace this change, to leave behind everything he had known, was terrifying. What happens if I don't join you? He asked, the question lingering in the air. If you don't, she said, her voice quiet but resolute, you'll be left behind. The world won't wait for you to catch up. And when the system changes, you'll be on the wrong side of history. The businessman felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead. He had never felt so powerless. He had built his life on the idea that he could control everything, that his power could protect him from anything. But now, he was faced with a decision that no amount of wealth or influence could solve. He had a choice to make, to fight against the future and risk being swept aside, or to embrace a new world and be a part of something bigger than himself. The officer had given him the truth, but now it was up to him to decide whether to accept it or reject it. He took a deep breath, his mind made up. I'm in, he said, his voice steady. I'll help you. But I need to know exactly what I'm signing up for. What's the next step? The officer nodded. The next step is simple. You'll help us roll out the technology, help us guide the transition. But you'll have to give up your old way of thinking. This isn't about business as usual. It's about building something new from the ground up. The businessman's heart raced as he realized the magnitude of what he was agreeing to. But for the first time in days, he felt a sense of clarity. The world was changing, and whether he liked it or not, he was going to be a part of it. And as he looked at the officer, he knew that the future was no longer just a question, it was a reality. A reality that he had to face head-on. The weeks following the businessman's decision to join the officer's cause were filled with uncertainty and rapid change. His once orderly world of meetings, deals, and controlled negotiations had been replaced by a whirlwind of action and unseen forces. The officer's project, the transformation she spoke of, had begun to take shape. It wasn't just a new technology, it was a new reality. The businessman, now an integral part of the team, found himself at the center of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. The technology was spreading faster than anyone had anticipated, and the shifts in power were already beginning. Some welcomed the changes, others resisted, and a few even feared what was coming. But there was no denying that the world was becoming a different place, one that was no longer defined by old systems or hierarchies. For the first time in his life, the businessman felt like a small cog in a machine much larger than himself. The control he had once prided himself on was slipping through his fingers, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The power structures he had relied on were crumbling, and in their place, a new order was rising. The officer's vision was becoming a reality, and he was helping bring it to life. But as the project continued to gain momentum, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There were moments, small moments, when he saw a glimpse of the potential dangers lurking beneath the surface. The technology was powerful, yes, but it was also unpredictable. He had been told that it was designed to bring people together, to reshape society for the better. But he couldn't help but wonder, what if it didn't? In the quiet hours of the night, when the world was asleep, the businessman often found himself questioning his role in all of this. Was he part of something noble, something that would ultimately benefit humanity? Or was he helping to create a system that would ultimately strip people of their autonomy and their freedom? His doubts grew when he saw the officer's growing influence over the project. She had become more than just a leader, she had become a symbol. People followed her without question, trusting in her vision and her direction. But the more he watched her, the more he began to see the subtle signs of a growing authoritarianism. Her calm demeanor, her unwavering certainty, it was all starting to feel too controlling. One night, after a particularly intense meeting where the officer had presented the next phase of the project, the businessman couldn't take it anymore. He had to confront her. He had to understand if she truly saw the potential dangers that he was beginning to see. He found her in her office, standing by the window, looking out over the city. The lights of the skyline twinkled in the distance, a reminder of the world they were shaping. When she heard him enter, she turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "What is it?" she asked, her voice calm but sharp. "I need to understand," he said, his voice low. "I need to know if you truly see what's happening. This project, it's growing faster than anyone thought. People are starting to follow you like a leader, not just a project manager. I've seen the way they look at you. Like you hold all the answers. Like you control the future." The officer's gaze didn't waver. "I am leading the way forward. And people follow because they believe in what we're doing. They believe in the change we're bringing." He stepped closer, his voice trembling with frustration. "But don't you see? This isn't just about bringing change, it's about control. You're not just reshaping the world, you're controlling it. You're making people dependent on the system, on the technology, on you. Is that really the future you want?" For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, she exhaled slowly, as though considering his words carefully. "Control is a natural part of any system, whether you acknowledge it or not. The current system we live in is built on control, on power. But the difference is that we're offering a new kind of control. One that is transparent, that works for the greater good." The businessman's heart raced. But is it really for the greater good? Or is it just for you? For us? For the few who have the power to shape it? The officer's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You're asking the wrong questions. You're still thinking like the old world. The new world is about unity, about progress. It's about finding balance, and if that means controlling the systems that govern us, then that's what it will take." "Balance," the businessman repeated, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "This isn't balance. This is just the new face of power. You've created a system where everyone depends on you. They don't have a choice." For the first time, he saw a flicker of emotion in her eyes. A flash of something darker, something that reminded him of the woman he had once thought he understood. "I've made the choice to lead because I know what's at stake. I know what needs to happen. This is bigger than all of us." The businessman's heart sank. He had seen it in her eyes, this was no longer about the world changing for the better. This was about her vision, her control. And he was trapped in it, unable to escape. "I can't be a part of this anymore," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've made my choice." The officer didn't respond immediately. She simply stood there, looking at him with an almost imperceptible sadness in her eyes. Finally, she spoke. "Then you're already lost." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had made his decision, but it wasn't one he could undo. The officer had been right, there was no turning back. He had chosen to stand against the future she was building, and now he would have to live with the consequences. As he left her office that night, he realized that everything he had known, everything he had fought for, was gone. The world was changing, and he had no place in it. And the officer's vision, whether he agreed with it or not, would continue to unfold. He had been a part of something much bigger than himself, and now he was nothing more than an outsider, watching as the future moved forward without him. There would be no going back. The shift had already begun. And the businessman had to face the reality that the world he had once known was now a distant memory. Weeks passed since the businessman made the choice to distance himself from the officer's vision. His life, once defined by control and power, had become a series of quiet moments of reflection. He had withdrawn from the project and the influence he once held, trying to rebuild a life that felt more like the one he had known before the project took hold. But every attempt to return to the old ways felt futile. He couldn't escape the change that had begun, nor the lessons he had learned along the way. In the silence of his new office, which felt much smaller and less significant than before, he often found himself lost in thought. What had he really been fighting for? Was it power? Control? Or was it something deeper, something he had never fully understood until now? One evening, as he sat in his office, staring out at the same city skyline that had once represented his empire, a visitor arrived. It was the officer. Her presence was calm but commanding, just as it had always been. She didn't knock or announce her arrival. She simply entered, her expression unreadable. "I expected this," she said, her voice steady as she sat down across from him. "I knew you would walk away. I've seen it happen before." The businessman didn't respond immediately. He had no words left, no defenses. The truth had sunk in too deeply. He had chosen his path, and now, all he had was the hollow sense of loss. "You were right about one thing," he said finally, his voice tinged with regret. "This wasn't about the world changing for the better. It was about control. But I couldn't see it at the time. I was too caught up in my own idea of what the future should look like." The officer watched him carefully, as though measuring his every word. It wasn't just about control. It was about creating something that could last. The world we built, your world, was built on a system that was dying. We all have to make difficult choices, and sometimes those choices come at a cost. He nodded, the weight of her words settling on him. He had always believed in his own ability to shape the future, to dictate the rules of the game. But in the end, it wasn't about power or wealth. It was about something more fundamental, understanding when to let go and when to embrace change. "You were right," he said quietly. "I was too attached to my own version of the world. Too afraid to see the bigger picture." The officer's eyes softened for a moment, as if she were seeing him for who he really was. "It's not easy," she said. "Letting go of what you know. Of what you've spent your life building. But sometimes, letting go is the only way to move forward. The world is changing, and if we don't change with it, we risk being left behind." A heavy silence settled between them, the unspoken truth hanging in the air. The businessman had made his choice to walk away, but in doing so, he had come to understand the most important lesson of all. He could no longer cling to a vision of the world that no longer existed. He had to accept that the future wasn't something that could be controlled or shaped by a single person. The future was a collective effort, and it was beyond anyone's power to hold on to it forever. As the officer stood to leave, the businessman felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. He had faced his fears and accepted the truth about himself. The future wasn't his to control, but it was his to navigate. And that was enough. "Thank you," he said, his voice quieter now, filled with understanding. "For showing me the truth." The officer gave him a small nod, as if acknowledging his journey. "You made the right choice," she said simply. "Sometimes, the hardest part is realizing that the past can't be fixed. But you can still make the future yours." As she left the room, the businessman sat back in his chair and gazed out at the city once again. The skyline had changed since the last time he had looked out at it, but so had he. The old world he had once fought to preserve was gone, and with it, his former self. But there was hope in the change, in the possibility of something new. The world would go on, whether he was a part of it or not. But he had learned that the most important lesson wasn't about holding on to control, it was about learning to let go and trust in the journey ahead. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibilities. And for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to face it.